Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Creating Forward Movement when it's Crass to Fundraise. I'm going to go ahead and leave that warm-up poll up for another few minutes while I go through some housekeeping. Turnkey tries to bring you information that can help you and your organization be more successful. We are continuing to do that during our current COVID-19 pandemic. And this afternoon, backed by popular demand, we have updated our guidance for you to connect with your people when it feels crass to fundraise. Before I introduce our speakers, just a few points. One, we are recording this webinar and we will be sharing that recording as well as a PowerPoint deck with you in an email tomorrow. And we'll also be posting all of those resources on our homepage at turnkeyp2p.com. Also, we want this to be an interactive session, so we'll be answering all of your questions. Some of you have already practiced using that Q&A function when you told us where you were calling in from. That will be the best way to ask us your questions, and we will either answer the questions during the course of the presentation or toward the end during a Q&A portion. So now for our speakers. First, we have Katrina VanHuss, who is the CEO of Turnkey. She has been developing revenue programs for organizations like the American Lung Association, the Arthritis Foundation, and March of Dimes since 1989 when she founded Turnkey. Her client successes and her dedication to research have made her a sought-after speaker. She also regularly shares her wit and business experiences blogging for Nonprofit Pro and is the co-author of the 2017 book, $, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. We also have with us Otis Fulton, who is the Vice President of Psychological Strategy at Turnkey. He also speaks regularly on the psychology of fundraising at national conferences. He writes a weekly blog on psychology and fundraising for Nonprofit Pro and is, strangely, the other co-author of the 2017 book, $, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. Otis has degrees in social psychology from Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Virginia. Katrina? You're on mute, my dear.
I'm muted.
What I said was really good too. I'm so sorry that you missed it. I'll start again. Actually, the only thing I really want to say is Holy Mother of God. Are you with me? It is the strangest time that we've ever had, and yet the time that is filled with opportunity if we choose to approach it that way. I was on the telephone with my mother the other day, and she's 77, and she is quarantined by herself. Close to one of my brothers, but by herself. And I was trying to help her with Zoom. And she said, "This phone is like a snake in my hand." And I'm like, I don't know where that analogy comes from, but I get it that you don't like the phone, right? So I'm like, Mom, you got a choice here. You can either look at the phone as a route to joy and connection, or you can look at the phone and call it a snake in your hand. So people, we are here to talk about joy and connection, and we're gonna get there. So we did this webinar exactly 4 weeks ago, or in COVID time that feels like about 6.5 months ago. Since we did it, we've learned a lot of things. We've seen some experimentation. We've done some experimentation ourselves. We're going to integrate that into the call today. So I am very hopeful that this will bring you value. We're going to talk about nonprofit health during a recession because, hello, we're here. Definitely going to happen. And we're going to talk about how to talk to people at this time. I see some friendly names on the participant list. Mona, Sandra, Suzanne, Sheila, your job is to ask us questions that make us look smart. So just so you know your role. Okay. All right. With that, let's go to the next slide.
You want to talk about the topics? Or a little bit more?
Oh, I did.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Otis and I are married, so we get to talk to each other this way. Okay. Go ahead, Otis.
That would be me. When we put together this presentation a month ago, I thought it'd be helpful to get some information about the last recession that we went through, 2007 to 2009. I ran across a study that was really, really good from Johns Hopkins University. What happened with nonprofits? I'd like to share that with you again. This was a bad time for nonprofits. 83% had reported financial stress. 40% said it was severe or very severe, and 51% recorded declining revenue. And these are the areas, the sectors that the revenue declined from, not surprisingly, because most nonprofit revenue is from individuals. That showed the greatest decline, but there was declines across the board. This black line is down 10% or more. The white here, the grayish, is down to less than 10%. So, it was an across the board drop for people. And, yet nonprofits showed tremendous resilience. In hindsight, the nonprofit sector, I thought this was fascinating. They boosted employment while not-for-profit employment declined. So we actually hired people. They actually took on a lot of volunteers as well. More than 2/3 of the respondents to the survey were very successful or successful coping with the financial crisis. And nearly 3/4 of the organizations were able to maintain or increase the number of people they served. This was particularly true with missions that they served vulnerable populations. And how do they accomplish that? Well, a variety of strategies, but I thought two that really stood out to me were many organizations stepped up their marketing and advocacy efforts. This is not a time to sit back and pull in, retrench. Over half of them launched or expanded their fundraising efforts. So they were very, very aggressive in going after their supporters. And it was a time really of nurturing, not so much acquisition, but they did a lot of fundraising. This is a blackbaud. I won't go too deeply into this. This is a blackbaud data, but it represents transactions from 80 organizations, 37 million donors, and we had a couple interesting takeaways. The first was that giving really lags changes in economic conditions. Charitable giving remained positive for more than 12 months from the start of the last recession, and there wasn't a measurable drop in giving for 9 months. And this bottom line, the blue line, that represents the donors. The declines in new donors were canceled out by giving from loyal donors. So, acquisition costs a lot of money. So the lesson to learn here is really go with the people that you brought to the dance, or whatever that saying is. We shouldn't try to overreact in times like this, and we should continue to invest in revenue that produces results. So what are nonprofits feeling like now? This is data that just came out in the last few days. This was published on give.org. It involved 118 charities and about 1,000 US adults. And, not surprisingly to us, 80% of charities anticipate the revenue to be lower than expected. 89% are concerned about maintaining financially stable. 93% believe that donors won't be able to give. But again, in hindsight, in the last recession, it's different from the donors' view. When you ask donors, 53% expect their donation level to remain the same. 31% say they plan to give more. So, of the donors that are polled, a whopping 84% say that they're going to keep the same level of giving or actually increase their living. And some interesting results that also the younger generations are also planning to step up their giving.
So your point here, Otis, is that this is completely mismatched with what we think they're thinking, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I thought this was worth talking about too. The purpose of emails in the last year. What are nonprofits sending out? Well, it's about half solicitation. I thought that your poll results were very interesting, and half were informational about the organization. And I think that this is a good mix in any time, much less the time we're in now. I think that this half and half is a half solicitation, half information is something that you should shoot for in any time.
So, some of the people who said they're doing 100% engagement or majority engagement, we want you, as we go through this webinar, please feel free to challenge our thinking. I mean, part of what we're all doing here is learning from each other. So we are very open to your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, one of my big roles is to write copy for messaging that nonprofits are sending out to their people right now. And I really am convinced that the best approach for talking to supporters anytime, but especially now in this crisis, is what we call a you-centric approach to messaging. So a you-centric approach, it's pretty simple to figure out. It's got a simple metric. how's your you count today? You really go through and take a message and count the number of times you say that we do the words you or your, and you can really pretty much determine how impactful that message is going to be. Because we really feel that it's all about the donor. It's all about the experience. The donors aren't giving to your organizations. They're giving through your organizations in order to make something important happen to them. But
if I could break in, the reason that we're using the phrase you-centric as opposed to donor-centric, which has been around a long time, is because many of the people on this call are peer-to-peer fundraising professionals. You-centric, everything Otis is saying applies to the communications with your fundraisers as well as to your donors.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And I really like this analogy that Jeff Brooks, famous fundraiser, uses. He calls it the Batman model. And it's not the model that you want to aspire to within your communications. In the Batman model, Batman's the boss, Robin's the helper, his sidekick. Batman gets all the glory. He drives a Batmobile. He wears a cooler outfit. He has a utility belt. Robin gets punched around a lot in the fights. And the Batman model puts the organization in the starring role. The donor is the helper who enables the organization to do the work, but is never the star. And Batman communications are full of things like, please donate so we can. Please help us support this great work. Very low U count. Again, these kind of messages has very low U count, so they're really not pitched directly to the donor. So this is how most nonprofits talk. This is what we call you whatever speech. We did this, we did that, we were amazing. Oh, by the way, thanks. So the donor is definitely in the Robin role. And we advocate you-centric communications for one reason. It raises a lot more money. Research has shown over and over that this communication raises more money. With your help, all these things, amazing things happen. Without your help, they don't.
Hey, Otis, if you can hang there for a second. I think one of the things that can happen is that you can use the word you and still manage not to be talking about that person. So if that sentence read, with your help, we did this, you've erected a fence between the donor and the organization and the mission. So, there is a way to use you and still screw it up. This sentence is not written that way.
The you has to be the active party. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Now, do you want to talk about the example that we showed a month ago, Katrina? Because I'm going to put that up next.
So we put this letter out a month ago, and on our website, you can still download it and make use of it. And Otis read through it that time. We won't do it this time. We'll explain its use. Most of you are not in this space right now. Most of you have been communicating with your constituents, and you've already said something. So you may not be in a position to use this letter. But what this letter does is seek to position the person psychologically to receive your ask soon. Otis, you want to run through it? And again, we'll make this available soon, but we recognize most of you are beyond this right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I say that, although last week we talked to an organization, a big national nonprofit that hadn't messaged their people since March 15th. So, we shouldn't make that assumption. I wrote this is an example of kind of a first message to supporters during this time. You probably told supporters they're a part of your nonprofit's family. So, you want to talk to them that way. And this message in a nutshell says, take care of yourself. So first sentence, very, very, very quick, very brisk, 6 words or less, just how I like to write. It gets the reader drawn in right away. I use the words caring and compassionate. Caring and compassionate are 2 of the 12 words that people recognize as describing someone who has high moral character. So we're telling them that they're that kind of a person. We say that without their support, nothing would happen. So we give them all the credit. We make them Batman, in other words. If there's any doubt about who this message is about, I use you or your 17 times. So it's really about them. There's no doubt. And I call this a permission message. What do I mean by that? It's a permission to take care of your family first. It's kind of the language of someone, a trusted other, that they would say, listen, this is a time you need to take care of yourself. Don't worry about us. Right now, you take care of yourself. And yet, the work of the organization is going to go on. And I'll be in touch with you about that because I know that that's important to you. And then we end with the PS. It's an offer for help. Again, the message of the language of the trusted other. Copywriters call the PS the first paragraph. Always put a PS in. People's eye, when they're scanning text, they go from the beginning, they immediately go to the end. So the PS is a way to really emphasize your message again. So let's talk about, so that's the first message. Let's talk about fundraising now. Is this a good time to fundraise? Absolutely. Should you fundraise? Absolutely. And you should fundraise for your own well-being and for the well-being of the people that support you. You know, now people are feeling isolated. They're feeling stressed from all different angles. I felt stressed from trying to decide whether to get a haircut 2 weeks ago. So sources of stress are just all over the place. People feel powerless. You know, we're trapped in our homes. There's a lot of things that we can't do. Psychologists call this, we're taking away our sense of agency. We can't act on the things that we find important. But psychologists tell us that actually doing pro-social behaviors, doing good deeds, lessens people's stress. So being involved in your organization is, I consider it a great gift that you can give to people at this time, because it's really going to have some very positive impacts on them. It can lessen their sense of isolation. You remind them that they're part of a community. Again, it provides them with an opportunity to do good, which we know has a very profound impact on lowering stress. And we can tell them what their support accomplishes, very, very important. Create the opportunities to take action and give them back that sense of agency that they're working through your organization to make something happen that they care very deeply about. Katrina, did you want to inject something there?
Okay, so now you've talked about the psychology, and we're going to pivot now. We're going to talk about moving to asking. Most of you hopefully are at the point that you've given them permission messaging, or you've been communicating in some way that will allow the next thing to happen, which is asking.
Yeah, so what about your next messages after you've given them permission to take care of themselves? You know, you want to find ways that really empower them. Use a lot of because of you language. Because of you, this happened. Again, without you, it wouldn't have happened. Before and after stories are great. Anecdotes. Homeless shelter. Frances was a homeless mother of two, and because of you, now she's got a place to live through this crisis. Tell them tell them why they are needed. They're needed very, very deeply, and make them part of something that's bigger than themselves. Give them that sense of connectedness. So this is an email that I actually wrote for a client the other day. This is a healthcare nonprofit. I'll read through this really, really fast. Let me just call it the Parkinson's instead of XYZ. It's not Parkinson's, but it makes it easier to read. So the subject line was, Parkinson's families are in crisis. They need your help. Notice I got you in right away. Dear Margaret, I'm reaching out to you because you've stood with Parkinson's Foundation through thick and thin. Please step forward again and make a gift today. You can make such a difference. You fought a brutal disease. Now you're fighting two brutal diseases. The coronavirus has hit your people hard. Those suffering from Parkinson's are now more isolated than ever. Your gift will protect the people you care about in this crisis. Because of you, and then I give something specific that happened that the Parkinson Foundation made possible. Because of you, I repeat that 3 times. Please make a gift to help Parkinson sufferers and their families when they need it the most. And then I've got a button that appears twice in a color, top and bottom. I'll help. Donate is the worst word. I'm sure it's not the worst word, but it's one of the worst words I can imagine, because it transactionalizes the relationship. Things like I'll help and count me in. There isn't any magic formula for it, but things that are more inviting to people to actually participate. There are a lot better things to donate. So that's the message, sample message for fundraising right now. Again, there's no magic formula, but this is a guideline. You notice a couple things. I used 11 U's here in a short letter. And the other thing I think is important, because I see this not done a lot, I make 2 asks for a donation. Most people stop reading after the second paragraph because they're really not reading, they're just skimming. So you want to get an ask in early. Getting 3 or 4 asks in a letter. 2 is about right for a letter of this length, but don't wait till the end to make an ask because people often don't read till the end. So you want to get it in early.
So Otis, if you were writing this and it was a plea to fundraisers to ask on behalf of the organization, would it follow pretty much the same construct?
I'm sorry, what was that now?
If this letter were,
yes.
It's to peer-to-peer fundraisers to activate them to fundraising.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, this format can definitely be used to, in my mind for that that sort of scenario, I don't really make a differentiation between fundraisers and donors. I see them both as a source of revenue. So I think this is perfectly appropriate for fundraisers as well as donors.
And is that because their reactions are not, it's really the same thing we're asking for, their support in one way or another. And it really doesn't matter what kind of support we're asking for.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Katrina. Whether they're a fundraiser or a donor, they're a supporter.
Okay.
So it may be a volunteer. I mean, it may have nothing to do with financial transaction at all. It may be you're asking someone to volunteer. Mm-hmm. Perfectly fine as well. This is the kind of language you want to use for any type of supporter.
So what you're implying is that the language is not situation specific. The language is human specific. This is about tapping into what will mobilize a human being, and that we don't need to adjust per thing that we're asking them to do in a significant way. It's an insignificant change to the communication, depending on what channel we're reaching them through or what reason we're reaching out to them.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Again, I think that the big shift, the way to shift your thinking about this is to think of the supporter as someone who does whatever they do for your organization through you. They're not donating to you, they're donating through you. So their behaving to make something happen. And you have to tell them that they're responsible for it. And because they participated, this is what happened.
Got it.
And that's the common thread through all this type of communication.
So which underscores the destruction that's done when I say something like the American Best Buddy Association Foundation accomplishes these things because it separates them from what their intended outcome is.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. It's really all about the donor. I was talking to a medical organization the other day trying to make this point, and I said, it's the surgeon who holds the scalpel, but it's the donor who puts the surgeon in the operating room. So it's the donor that's responsible for that surgery. So,
and I'll be frank with the group. We've been struggling with the language to use around this because we work in volunteer empowerment, volunteer leadership. We work in peer-to-peer fundraising and other types of fundraising. So we've settled on this youth-centric sort of method to communicate to encompass all those things because it really doesn't matter what we're asking them to do. It's about them.
Right. Yep. Okay, I'm going to show you one other type of communication. This is a survey, and people think of surveys as devices to gather information. In this particular survey, we're really not interested in the responses. What we're doing is, and you'll probably see as you read the items here, we're really interested in what psychologists call priming the reader's attitudes about the organization. So, dear First Name, we'd like to know what you think about how the coronavirus will affect the Parkinson's Foundation. Please check the statements that you agree with below. Despite the coronavirus, the work of the Parkinson Foundation is important and needs to continue. The Parkinson's Foundation provides me with a sense of community. Despite the coronavirus crisis, I'm still committed to the Parkinson Foundation. Thank you for taking time to give us your thoughts. Now, all of these things, we hope that a supporter that would be on our list would check all of these items. And we're really just reminding them about how important the work that they have invested in will continue to be. And so then we send them a thank you, follow up in the next 24 hours. Wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful. You. Thank you for responding to the survey we sent to our community yesterday. What you told us is very valuable. As I promised in my earlier email, I want to give you an update on the Parkinson's Foundation's mission. And then again, because of you, these great things are happening to Parkinson's sufferers, and to specific things are happening to Parkinson's sufferers and their caretakers as well. And then at the end of this, you add a solicitation button. I'll help. I'm in. Count me in. Whatever you have that will more likely to get the people to take action. So that's our clever survey. And we'd like to open it up now. We left plenty of time so that you could ask questions and engage us in a dialogue.
One of the things as you guys come up with your questions is, we reference emails, we reference letters, but in our New World Order, this kind of communications is used wherever they are forming community. So whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on a platform, in Discord, on Twitch, wherever it is where you use this language with your constituents. In a mass style, disseminated email, social media post, whatever. But also this can be scripting for your staff, which we highly encourage. I actually spent time with a client once who told me her trials and tribulations with her volunteers were, they act like it's their walk and, we're just helping. And I'm like, no, it's our walk and you're helping. And I'm like, I'm gonna call your boss as soon as you leave the room and say, you got to fire her, you got to do it now. Because it's really sort of the same thing. The language we're talking about is the language of empowerment for donors, for volunteers, for whomever. But the point is, this kind of language should not exist just in an email. One of the other points that I would make is that we heard an interesting story, and I understand now, I've always understood it, but Tom Ahern is someone whom we've formed a relationship with, and he's a highly regarded copywriter. And in his contracts, he writes, when people bring me on, part of my contract is that they don't get to edit my copy. I'm like, that's existing.
They cannot change a word of what he writes.
Not a word. And while that's extreme, and I'm sure there are people on this call who are going, oh, hell no. I understand it because we have seen rounds of copy that, we started with a strategy like the one Otis just articulated. And by the time it got back to us, it went through a committee to include the janitor, the janitor's wife, somebody they happen to meet in a bar, and then we get it back and it's unrecognizable because the people editing it didn't know the articulated strategy. So one of the things that Otis has begun to do is to provide a strategic outline of why the email says what it does. And we've had good success with that. And I would encourage you that if somebody else is editing your work, tell them why you said what you did. And that provides some inoculation against unnecessary editing because everybody wants to fix your words. Everybody, right? We also, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, please. The responsibility for the effectiveness of these messages are the Chief Development Officer. The two eyes that should approve copy and messaging wherever it appears belongs to the Chief Development Officer or the person that the Chief Development Officer appoints to be his or her proxy. That is it. Committee delegation is just it's a fool's errand. And I'm sorry, it wastes a lot of people's resource and it really waters down the effectiveness of copy more than enhancing it. In most cases, that's my experience.
I find it interesting that words in one form or another, either oral or verbal, are the only transmission point that we have with our constituents. And when you look at who's in charge of the actual words, not the website, not the email deployment, but the actual words, they're often someone who's very much relieved or removed from strategic conversation. They're often low paid, when in fact that is the most important deliverable that we have in production. So at Turnkey, we have, if you're working with us, copywriting's not cheap because it shouldn't be, and there should be a PhD writing it, and there is. So it's not a stance many people take yet, but I think they will.
We have a great question. Katrina, maybe you can answer first. Can you give me the 30-second commercial on why we should be fundraising right now? I need to sell my leadership. You want to go
Um,
first?
I'll go first, and then you can go too, because I'm sure we'll go two different directions. What I would say is that our constituents need us right now. They feel powerless. They want to help, but they don't know how. We can improve their lives, and we can help improve our financial position if we fundraise, because that's the route for them to feel power. Let me do it, please.
We're making a lot of assumptions about how people feel. This recent poll I put up, I've been waiting for it to come out. It shows that 84% of people want to donate at the same level or greater to our organizations. So we need to give them what they want. And they've made an investment in what you do. And you need to communicate to them that your investment is safe. Our operation is continuing. We haven't stopped. And I think that engagement is incredibly important now, and can really, the folks that stay with you can be cultivated to be even more more fervent supporters in the future. It can really come to mean even more to them if they're engaged right now.
Otis has a phrase. What is it that about the life story that people use nonprofits to?
Yeah, people use nonprofits to use to tell their life stories.
Yeah.
And
So,
yeah, good.
when you think about that, like a lot of young people, like my son, I test a lot of my theories on him. You know, he's in very different communities than I am, and and you know, the idea of going to, for example, a walk, no, not happy. And then he pointed out to me, Mom, you know, I believe in this peer-to-peer fundraising, victimized by a child in America when he was growing up. But I don't, unless we give them these opportunities, they're going to fix it to the degree that they're able and have exposure to themselves. We have to get out there. You have to give them the opportunity. All right, hope that's helpful.
Any suggestions on social media messages?
I think,
you want to go first?
sure. Number one, be there. Oh yeah, be there, because nobody's opened their email right now unless they already love you. There is no acquisition happening on email. Social media, it's really the same kind of messaging, just boiled down in my mind. And there's some really fantastic and clever people who are working in acquisition and fundraising and social media right now. But the same principles apply. It's the platforms that we are communicating on in social media, the new tools that we're using, it's still humans on the other end. And so I think we have to keep in mind some of the best practices about the humans are intact, and we have to write that way. Like what Otis just taught just now can be easily translated to social media, I believe. Otis, anything else?
Yeah, you know, we mentioned half request. I think, just my opinion, I think that half request messaging, half informational messaging about the nonprofits' successes are important. Requests have sad faces. Informational messages have happy faces. I know that sounds very trite, but that is something, that a guideline that works. I was recently reviewing a nonprofit's website for, they give to help pregnant women take their children through to term and so forth, and deliver them and support them afterwards. And they had all these faces, these happy women. They're having parties and dancing together in the park and so forth. And it just, why would you give to happy women? You know, you want to help alleviate some sadness. So in your request, you have sad faces or whatever. In your thank yous, in your informational, you have happy faces. Just kind of a rule of thumb. I use happy faces and sad faces kind of loosely, but you get the idea.
One of our folks commented, supporters need to be told what is needed and what to do. And I'm going to translate that into simplicity. We reviewed an email this morning that just flew through the company like wildfire. And it was just like, oh my God, did they really do that? No. It was, I don't know, 3 or 4 scrolls to get to the bottom of it. It had about 6 different asks in it. It was confusing. I didn't know what.
Well, no, 6 asks is fine, but it was asked for different things. Yeah. 6 asks for one thing is fine, but it was asked for here's a menu of things you might want to do, yeah. And I left at the end. I don't want to do anything because I didn't even want to read to the end. So
it's brutal. It was brutal. Peggy wants to know, would you advocate for us to make personal phone calls just to thank some of the larger volume donors, not to ask for money, but just to acknowledge their support in the past? I think outbound right now is critical. You know, we have to tell them that we love them, that we, you know, the language that Otis used, use that on the phone, use that, you know. I'm so grateful, you know, for what you've accomplished through us. And right now it's really about you. Are you doing okay?
Peggy, let me go even farther. I couldn't agree with Katrina more, so much so, I think if you would organize volunteers to call other people in your organization for you, you would be doing a great thing. Number one, the volunteers would love to make those calls. And number two, I think it's so crucial that people get phone calls and, you know, just have a very short script. I'm calling on behalf of Parkinson's Foundation. I'm not going to ask you for any money tonight. We just want to tell you that thank you for being part of our Parkinson's Foundation family, and just want to know how you're doing, know the work is going on. You know, can be something open-ended, brief phone calls. I think that is fantastic. Very powerful.
Where was that nonprofit study from? I'm not sure which one you're referring to. If you can pop us an email or a screenshot, we'll tell you that. Any suggestions for Giving Tuesday now? In fact, we have a whole 30, 45-minute webinar of suggestions. It's on our website. There's a recording. Otis, you and Vicki handle that one for the most part. Anything specific for Giving Tuesday now? I know they run together. Like we've been.
I can't recall that particular webinar. I'm sorry. We've done so many webinars lately, but Frank, I'm not the Giving Tuesday expert. I'm you know, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all right. But I would point you at that webinar for specific guidance on what to do. Next, our organization is not functioning right now, youth sports. We have a local day of giving coming up, and in comparison to the needs of human service orgs, it seems hard to ask for funds at the moment. What is the best way to ask for funds for orgs that may not seem vital at the moment? My first response is, well, your constituents and the people to whom you provide the service may feel differently about whether your organization is critical, because everybody's locked themselves in the closet to have a phone call and their kids are losing their minds. So I would maybe challenge that in the way that we're challenging how our donors feel about us right now and what their likelihood is to give. And the second thing is, you know, if you turn this thing on its head and you think about the need of your donor, the need of your donor is to feel powerful. The need of your donor is to feel important. Then give them that chance. You know, link your messaging to COVID to the extent that you're able. Talk about the good work they've done already and that you're not going to let that go to waste, and go to market. Do it. Otis, anything
No,
else?
I agree with you. I think it's important to tell people that they made an investment, and when we come out of this thing, the organization's still going to be here. It needs to be here. And that you can support us now because we need you just as much as we did.
And, you know, there is, when we come out of this, things are not going to go back to normal. Your programming may change, and now may be the time that you develop new programs to deploy at the same time as your fundraising. We've seen some really clever mission delivery changes in response to COVID, and in our minds, they should be linked to fundraising for sure, for sure. So I will plug a couple of other webinars that we've already done. One of the things we believe here at Turnkey is that the way community forms and manifest is changing. Not the human's need for it, not the way we react to it, but simply the tools that we use to gain community. And that is, in our mind, more important right now than even fundraising, is how to create community. And by community, I mean fostering the ability for our constituents to talk not just to us and us to them, but to each other. That's the joy that we've been delivering on Event Day, where we allow them to come together to celebrate, to mourn, to grieve, and to move forward with hope. And I don't know why we decided we should only let them have that for one day. That seems silly in retrospect. Why won't we give that to them all the time? So I think that's what's happening now. We're figuring out, how do we give them that joy all the time? And we're going to have to be really creative in the short term because we don't have the technology to support that in a big way. But that's where we're going. That's where we're going. We're going to deliver joy all year long. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to turn into something better than what we had before. Should we consider text to donate channels right now? Is anyone fundraising with WhatsApp? That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't heard that. We do a lot with Facebook fundraising. We do quite a lot there, a lot of consulting, and we have a technology partner, Good United, that we use. Instagram is coming alive now, but I have not heard anything about WhatsApp. The challenge, and I know you guys are probably already lamenting it, is the fractured communication channels that we have to support. You know, just because you send 75% less email doesn't cost 75% less, right? You still got to support that channel. You still got to write the emails, deploy the emails, have the platform, all of it. And now you've got these other things. So that's really challenging. And the answer will make itself known at the end of the day, how we're going to deal with that. But there will be some smart communication technology company that comes forward with an answer, I think, to us managing that. Should we consider text to donate? Yes. And again, applying the principles that Otis just said, we cannot rely on email. If you are only emailing, it's a bad day. It's a bad day. I was just on the telephone with somebody from the UK, and they pointed something out to me that I hadn't thought about, which was they are much further along in terms of having online communities, true communities, in the UK and in Europe because of GDRP. They already recognized and have experienced that email is no longer a viable communication channel for acquisition. And in some cases, it's not a viable channel for ongoing communication with constituents. You can't use it in engagement scoring anymore because people who love you are not opening your emails. So it's become like certified mail. You know, you only email certain things when you need a chain for some legal reason often, but only old people like me really enjoy email still, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and we're moving to other platforms. Yes.
yeah, this is such a good time to investigate and invest in alternative, what are now workaround communications channels, because when we come out the other end of this, I think that these communication channels are going to be go-tos that you may use over and over and over again to great benefit.
Yeah. One of the partnerships that we've been exploring, we are working on, we're not exploring, we're in. I mentioned that email opens can't really be used to identify affinity in an engagement score anymore. And that's not because they don't love you, it's because they don't open emails. And Jen Shang with the Institute of Sustainable Philanthropy makes the point that their behaviors don't always show you how they feel about you. And she uses an entirely different method of asking them how they feel. Otis, can you describe that in short? Can you summarize that?
Well, Jen's philosophy is that what really, her organization's name is the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. And she believes what sustains philanthropy is an individual's feeling about the organization. And so what she talks about is doing things like the you-centric communication that leads to people feeling joy in participating in the nonprofit's mission. So I'm not sure what else you wanted to.
Well, that's it pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very scientific approach, but it really has not a lot to do with the behaviors that they're exhibiting. And in today's market, when the behaviors they're exhibiting are on this fractured set of communications tools, and it's really hard to bring them in a meaningful way so that you can really understand affinity. Her method just asks them how they feel, and then she gives them a treatment, and then we measure again. So it's very powerful. It's very different. Okay, if email is dead or direct mail, how are you pushing your message? Crowdfunding, P2P, social media, question mark. How do you get them to engage with your org? And the answer is it's really a difficult time to be fundraising because your budget is built for email and print and a website, and now it is fracturing. It is fracturing. I think we're going through what television advertisers went through in the 80s and 90s when cable showed up. Suddenly all the eyeballs weren't constrained to 3 stations anymore. Now the eyeballs are all over the place. We're going through that dry heave, I think, right now. Looking at where people are active with you and even asking them, you know, how do you want to be communicated with if you have that level of sophistication in your communications. A good CRM is super important right now because you got to track how they're going to talk to you. There are some people who will never interact with us outside the Facebook environment, and better to just accept it. Better to just accept it than to spend all our time trying to get them to communicate the way their mom communicated with us. They're going to say no. So it is a time to plug in that 22-year-old in this space to help understand how are people forming community? How is that happening? Because I can tell you that on the ground, things are changing so fast. I mean, if my mom can go from my phone is a snake in my hand to I can see you talking, that's really dramatic. That's really something. 10 years ago, I missed something. I missed it big. I was walking through my house. My 2 young sons were on the floor playing video games. We were the only 3 people in the house. And one of my sons looked at me and he said, "Hey, Trey said hello." I'm like, "Trey who?" I'm like, "Trey the neighbor." I'm like, "He's not here." He said, "I mean, it's insider game, Mom." Like, that should have been the moment where I went, holy mother of God, we got to do something different than what we're doing now. I didn't react. And now, we're all going to react at the same time because we have to. So
I've got a couple comments. I have a couple comments. Yeah, direct mail is not dead. It's just it's a channel that gets you a trickle of response, but it does pay for itself, and good direct mail pays for itself 3 or 4 times over. And I've been trying to figure out a way to quarantine Katrina's mom for 5 or 6 years. I'm just sorry that everybody else has to suffer now that I've achieved it. I just had to get that out.
You're so funny. Anyway, people, thank you so much for joining us. If there are things you want to talk about, let us know. This is fun to interact with you. I know what we're going through is not fun, but I truly believe when we come out the other side, we will have taken leaps ahead that would have taken us 2 decades otherwise. So be well, really mean that differently this time, and stay safe. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.